All right, so we've talked about a whole bunch of squishy things and parasitic things. Let's talk about hard and crunchy things. In this case, we're going to talk about the arthropods. Phylum Arthropoda consists of, go figure, hard-shelled organisms with jointed appendages. This is the basic body plan of every arthropod. There is a head, followed by a thorax, and an abdomen. There are also jointed appendages, and those jointed appendages are going to do basically everything for the organism. Outside of this organism, it has an exoskeleton that's made of chitin. That exoskeleton is extremely hard in some places, but it has to give in other places in order for there to be bend. That outer covering doesn't necessarily keep growing with the organism. So these arthropods tend to shed their shells in order to grow new ones. The exoskeleton is impermeable to water. That is, water cannot get through the exoskeleton. This is an adaptation to life on land. Remember, lack of water is a big problem. So it gave them an early adaptive advantage. They were able to leave the ocean and carry some ocean along with them in their carapace. They had like a little scuba system, basically. They've got gills that would sit inside the water and allow it to breathe. Their insides didn't dry up. The jointed appendages allow the insects to swim, walk, fly, breathe, reproduce, eat, all sorts of things. As I mentioned, aquatic arthropods have gills. You guys ever eaten crabs? Like cracked open crab, eaten it? You'll often see these feathery structures. Those aren't things that you really eat. You can, they're not going to kill you, but they don't have any taste or meat to them. These are their gills. That's where gas exchange occurs. And you'll notice they got these feathery structures, lots of twists and turns. Because when in doubt, why do you have twists and turns in biology? Surface area. The greater the surface area that's touching the water, the more oxygen that can diffuse across, the more energy the crab can have. On land, you don't have gills because, go figure, you're not constantly immersed in water. On land, they have to have gas exchange still, and they have fluids that are through their body. That fluid's called hemolymph. Along the body, you'll have spiracles, little openings to the environment. As the hemolymph passes those openings, it picks up oxygen and allows the organism to continue cellular respiration to have energy. One way that we kill insects, one way that insects, we control them, is by sprinkling powder on the ground. Have you guys seen this before? Like a borax or something like that. You didn't know? So if you take borax, it will kill just about any insect. Cockroaches and things, yes?
Is it tracheal system like adjacent or the same as like a respiratory system?
It is the equivalent of a respiratory system.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Because basically, oxygen's coming in, but you're not respiring in and out. You're not breathing. Does that make sense?
So where does the waste gas go?
Out the spiracles.
Oh, so it's just in and out of all these little...
Yep.
Okay.
But if we take this powder, borax, talcum, whatever, put it on an insect, it covers up their spiracles and they can't breathe. Cool thing about arthropods is they do have a complete digestive system. Mouth to anus, it all works. Their digestive system, especially the land-based ones, are supremely adapted to retaining water. The way that works is you've got a lot of waste coming into the organism, a lot of food going into the organism. It's going to start taking nutrients out of it. It's pulling water out of it. As it goes through the digestive system, salt, water, and nitrogenous wastes are pumped into that waste. And then, as we get closer to the rectum, the water is pulled back out. So you're pumping waste in with water because the waste is dissolved in water. And then as you get closer and closer, basically think of it squeezing the water back out into the organism while keeping the waste. So you get a super highly concentrated waste pellet at the end of the digestive tract. It helps you retain water while getting rid of your waste. Got a whole bunch of subgroups of arthropods. One of the chelicerates, spiders, horseshoe crabs, scorpions, ticks, and mites. Again, I'm not going to go through terribly much. The basic body plan of chelicerate is cephalothorax, which is a thorax and the head are combined together. So here you can see a shrimp. In case you haven't seen a shrimp before, this is the part you eat, 1 through 6. This part over here, that's the head. The head and thorax have been combined into one unit. Horseshoe crabs are one of my favorite organisms. They're a living fossil. They've been present they've existed in their present form for 450 million years. We said life first came about, what, multicellular life 590 million years ago? So about 100 million years later, we get this form, and it stayed. Why does this have the same form now that it had all those millions and millions of years ago? Yeah. Because it works. Yeah. This is the right form for surviving in waves. It allows it to survive longer. We need to adapt. We got sea spiders. These are closely related to true spiders, and they look like true spiders. These guys live and excrete through. They excrete through holes in their legs. Nothing big. Spiders. You guys know about spiders. You see them all over the place. They live in your house. Surprise. Where you think they're not, that's where they are. I only picked 2 spiders to concentrate on, the black widow and the brown recluse, because both are common in Virginia. You've heard of black widow spiders before, and a Marvel character named after a black widow spider. The bite from a female black widow can cause muscle cramps, joint pain, and migraines for about 24 hours. It's not deadly. It's not going to kill you. It's painful. It hurts. The brown recluse, you get bit from a male or a female, and it will cause what's called arachnogenic necrosis. Arachnogenic necrosis sucks. Basically, your muscle starts to liquefy where you were bit. Anybody ever been bit by a black widow or a brown recluse? I've been bit by a brown recluse. I was in my basement, and I got bit by a brown recluse, and basically, it was when I was in graduate school, and there's not much they can do for it. There's no like counter agent. You can't go to the doctor and they're like, here's the cure. You just have to let it play out. So I had on my leg, where was it on my leg? No, wait, it was on my arm. Where's the hole? There's a scar somewhere on the back of my arm that I can never see. Yeah.
I think I actually was bit by a black widow, and it left like a dent in the, like right here.
Yep.
It had like a pocket, basically.
You very well could have been, or a brown recluse. But what happens is, where they bit you, or when I was bit, the tissue began to liquefy. There's basically a hole there. You had to just wrap it tight. If you went to the doctor, what the doctor would do is clean out the dead tissue and fill it in with basically a foam until other tissue would regrow in that area. Very, very painful. Not anything you want to ever happen to you. There they go. They live in Virginia. They live in Midlothian. They're probably at your house. Enjoy. What?
Hobo spiders.
Hobo spiders? I don't even know those. What are hobo spiders?
They're very common in Oregon, and they basically do the same thing as
Brown recluse? Yeah.
brown recluse. My mom was bitten that day.
You're-
My mom goes through everything.
So, scorpions. Scorpions don't live around here. You don't have to worry about these much. They live out in desert conditions. Cool thing about scorpions is they have a chemical in their carapace that glows under ultraviolet radiation, so under black light. If you were to go out in the desert and shine a black light, you'll see the desert floor light up with scorpions. If you were to shine it under your bed in the desert, maybe they're there. Who knows? Ticks. Okay, welcome to Virginia. You've all been bitten by a tick at some point in your life, right? No? Well, you're going to. This is a close-up of the tick's head. The tick has what's called a hypostome attached to its mouth. So the mouthpieces open up, and that hypostome will get punctured into your skin. This is what it's using to hold on to you. You know they're hard to get off because those barbs face backwards. So it slides in easily, but it's hard to pull out. So far, so good? That hypostome serves as an anchor and a feeding tube. It's basically a straw. Now, you can get a lot of diseases from ticks. How ticks pass a disease to you is not when they stick their hypostome in, because they are sucking up food. It's when they go to leave, they have to regurgitate. So they release some of their stomach contents through the hypostome in order to cause it to contract so you can slide it out. In order to pull out a tick, you have to pull it out by the head. Do not pull it out by the body. You might leave the hypostome in, which basically gives you it's a tube directly into your bloodstream that other microorganisms can get into and you get sick. They can live for up to 200 days without food. So if you put it in a bag and hold it until the doctor's office or whatever, it's still going to be alive and kicking. Mites. Within 2 years of use, 1/3 of a pillow's weight's comprised of dead skin cells, bugs, dead dust mites, and their droppings. Fun. You've seen mites probably, some sort of mites. You guys, those little red dots that go all over the place? Yeah, mites. Myriapods, centipedes and millipedes. These are one of the earliest known lamb phyla. They came out of the oceans first. Centipedes, you can recognize them because they have 1 pair of segments per leg. Millipedes have 2 pairs of segments. Centipedes tend to be poisonous. I'm sorry, venomous. And poisonous. Don't eat them either. If you wanted to. A centipede bite can be very painful, but for us, it's not usually fatal because we're bigger than it is. Other organisms, though, for instance, here you can see a centipede that's bitten and devouring a snake. You don't want to mess with them. And then we got our crustaceans. Crabs, lobsters, barnacles, and shrimp. We've mentioned earlier, you've looked at crabs before you've eaten crabs. You can determine the sex of a crab by looking underneath its shell. Females, they usually have a dome shape, while males have this sort of phallic exterior, so you can't really see it too well. If you look here, you can see this is like a dome, and this one kind of goes like this, and very phallic. It's not a good image, so I'm sorry about that. The Japanese spider crab can have a walking leg span of 3 to 4 meters. That's a freaking big crab, right? They sell them in the markets? Giant, huge crabs. 8 meters long when outstretched. It's a lot of crab. Fun issue. I just read an article that the snow crab population in Alaska has bottomed out. Basically, snow crab is not going to be harvested this year. If you wanted any snow crab, probably not going to get it, or it'll be extraordinarily expensive. Where there used to be 9 billion crabs in the region, it's down to 1 billion this year, and we expect it's going to continue to drop. Partially, they say overfishing, but also due to climate change. The water's getting too warm. Yes?
Didn't they go to Russia or something? The snow crabs?
Did they migrate?
Yeah.
Well, they've always lived there too, but yeah.
I thought they just sort of mass exodus.
I'll check. I don't know. I honestly don't know what their plans were. Oftentimes, crabs are boiled alive. Contrary to popular belief, they do feel pain, and they remember it. So if you took a crab and you threw it into a crab pot and you started to boil it, and that crab escaped, it would avoid crab pots for the rest of its life. But don't worry, when you boil them and you hear this sort of screaming, it's not that they're screaming in pain. That's just their insides literally boiling and vaporizing and coming out the cracks in their shell. They're in pain, they're just not screaming. Lobster. Lobster comes in every single color except red. But when you cook them, every single lobster turns red because of the chemicals in its carapace. Way before we used to serve lobster as a delicacy, like you go out now and you're like, lobster's expensive. It was cheap, very, very cheap food. It was so cheap, primarily because, think about them, they're garbage eaters of the sea. Nobody would eat these things. They're cockroaches. There was a law that had to be passed, I want to say during Victorian times in England, that you could not feed a prisoner lobster more than 3 times a week, because it was the cheapest food you could get. It was bycatch. So they'd get it, they'd cook it, and they'd feed it to prisoners, and that's just the way it worked. But yeah, every other color. There are pink lobsters, purple lobsters, green lobsters, just no red ones. Barnacles. Barnacles are interesting. I ate barnacles once. I was over in Portugal and my cousins were like, hey, eat this. And I was like, okay. And then I was like, what is it? And they're like, it's the thing you get off the side of the boat. So yeah, eating barnacles, they're crunchy and salty. What I find interesting about barnacles is the male reproductive organ gets shorter and stouter in rough weather. So if the waves are rough or if it's cold, the male reproductive organ shrinks. But it gets longer and thinner when you're in placid, warm water. So it is usually 8 times its entire body length. That's the male sex organ. 8 times the length of the entire body. So Michael, how tall are you? 6'1". So let's see, 6 times 8 is 42, right? 6 times 8, is that 42? No. Yeah? No, that's 48, yeah. 7 times 6 is 42. Okay, cool, 48. So if you were standing there, no, you know what, you'll sit at your table. 1, 2. Oh, wow. Okay, cool. If you were sitting right there, you could mate with somebody in the other room without moving. And that's super important for barnacles because they're non-sessile, they don't move. So you're only going to be able to mate with the people around you. That's uncomfortable? There we go. It's actually really funny if you were to watch a video. What you see is the male's sex organ comes out and just starts poking all the barnacles around it. Like, are you ready to mate? Are you ready to mate? How about you? I'll just reach a little farther. The more you know. Shrimp. Shrimp can only mate when they're in between exoskeletons. Their genitals are not available when they haven't molted. So there we go. Those are the arthropods. We covered a lot of them. The one group we haven't talked about are insects, and we're going to talk about those next.